Let's talk about that. So this brings us perfectly to the shirt I'm wearing today, which I need to tell you about. So it's Humboldt University in Berlin. All right. And what this is essentially the prototype for the modern research university.
Wow.
And so I think one thing that's really interesting about education and change in education, as someone who's now been working in this for 10 years, and I know you're passionate about this as well, is that when you look at an institution like a university or even a high school, I think that with a lot of other things, like, your iPhone or whatever, there's a memory of like, oh, this didn't used to be here and now it is, right? Like, we're recording this on a laptop, using things that, like, this just didn't used to exist in my lifetime, right? And so for me, it's like, oh, this is new. And you think this is where change can happen, right? Like, I can create change here. But when you think about a university or a school, I mean, part of the whole brand is this idea that, like, it's been here forever and it'll be here forever, and we think, well, it's just always been this way. So this is how it has to be, right? And what I love, and the reason why I had to go to Humboldt when I was in Berlin and why I love wearing this shirt, is it's a reminder to me that, no, actually, this was created, in the 19th century. And at the time, it was a radical idea. The idea that you would combine research and education together. Like, that was just not done. The initial colleges were created for religious purposes. And Harvard and sort of the early ones, and even earlier than that, Oxford and Cambridge in the UK, were basically to, deliver knowledge to clergy, and after that to people who were wealthy and just wanted to know how to absorb the received knowledge of the time, and it wasn't going to change. It was very static, and it was basically like, how do you absorb what we already know? And this is what we know. And then the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution happened, and we realized, oh wow, there's different ways to study the universe, and we actually don't know that much.
Yeah.
Right. And so what does that mean? Is that depressing or exciting? To me, it's exciting. And to the idea of the Enlightenment, it's exciting because it means there's so much to discover, right? And the Humboldt University, which at the time was actually named after the king of Prussia. You have to name it after the king.
You have to
right?
name it after the king.
In order to get any support.
There's no other way.
Which at the time, the king was the state, and so it's not that different maybe from the University of Michigan, the state, right? But this is a university that there's the founder of it. Essentially was Wilhelm von Humboldt, and the Humboldts are interesting. There's two brothers, and this is Germany way back in the 1800s.
Germania probably wasn't even a country, a nation then.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I think it's Prussia at the time, so it's sort of this like big amalgamation of different. But so Wilhelm was like the education guy, and his brother actually, Alexander von Humboldt, also a very impactful guy, was this explorer who would just go to like the Peruvian jungles and like discover all kinds of things, and just at least discover for sort of Western,
New world, Western.
Yeah, but interesting guy on that front as well. Sort of, there's a book called The Invention of Nature about Alexander von Humboldt, of how his exploration led to this whole new way in sort of the quote unquote West of thinking about nature. But Wilhelm, meanwhile, is back home in Prussia, coming up with this new model for education and saying, it's not sufficient to just have a place where you go to receive the knowledge that is forever. It's like, no, that part of education should be based on the newest knowledge. And so what we need is to have a combined institution where, on the one hand, we're pursuing the newest, best understanding of the world and of the universe. And that's research, right? And on the other hand, those same people who are doing that are transmitting that knowledge to students to gain sort of a base understanding, so they then also can go and try to understand the world in their own way. And the ideas, I'm reading off the Wikipedia page here, of the Humboldtian model of higher education. The ideas that it was based on are the ideas of the autonomous individual on the one hand and the world citizen on the other. And so it's this idea that it creates the idea of academic freedom, which today is one of the most important concepts in higher education, that in order to truly pursue knowledge that might actually be sort of counter to established status quo ideas, right? You have to have the freedom to have ideas that are not orthodox, that that the state might not even like, even if they're funding the research. And you have to have autonomous individuals being able to ask whatever questions they want, pursue whatever they think is the way to go, with a mindset of world citizenry that everything we're doing is trying to improve the world.
Exactly.
Right? And so, this is like core to the university today, but at the time it was radical. No one had ever combined research and education before. The idea of even doing this was radical. And, what this led to was the I can't even remember the name of it, Friedrich something University.
Right.
And then, there was a time, when the Nazis took power and then this university actually closed, and then it reopened after the fall of the Third Reich as the Free University of Berlin for a period of time, and then was eventually named after Humboldt as sort of a nod to the initial purposes of it.
Wow.
And so the reason why I go so deep into that, and the list of alumni from this school and researchers from the school is just, it's incredible. It's Einstein, right? Before he got chased out of Germany by the Third Reich, right? And we were lucky to get him over here. Right?
We were.
But it's Einstein, it's Marx, Engels, Nietzsche, Freud. It's a huge number of people, all the way up to present day, actually, recently present day, Angela Davis. Others have spent time there.
It looks like I have to spend some time there. Maybe both of us.
Hey,
we should go.
It was a pretty cool campus also, I got to say. And Berlin's an amazing city. But the reason why I'm so excited about this is that it reminds me that, okay, that was a radical change. And that was something that no one had done before. And it now led to this whole new way of learning and exploring the world. But that was the 19th century.
Yeah.
And we're still based on a very similar model. But that change was possible. What changes might be possible today, right? And I think one of the things that has not changed enough, a couple of things, and I think these are two of the things that you're most passionate about, and some of the work you're doing now with the School of Education, which I'd love to talk about if we could. It's public now, yeah?
Yeah. It's semi-public. Hopefully the time this podcast releases, it's
public enough for a podcast.
Public enough for a podcast. Definitely.
So one is that despite the more inclusive idea of the Enlightenment, that the autonomous individual, everyone has to be able to pursue what they want, higher education today is still extraordinarily exclusive. As you said, you're part of the Summer Bridge program and you feel like, oh, wow, students from all backgrounds are here, and people who understand the life I've been through are here. And then 42,000 of the 43,000 come back, and you're like, oh, wow, actually, it's a lot of very wealthy people.
It's a shift.
Yeah. And so that's one, is that it's still not reaching the full diversity of people in our society. And I believe talent is distributed across society. And so we're not creating a platform for people who are qualified and could do great things in the world right now, to the extent we need to. And then the other is that I think that, at least on the undergraduate education side, another thing that's useful to remember is that the features of today, another critical feature in addition to the ones that were introduced by Humboldt, is now grades.
Yeah.
Right. And at the time, Humboldt was emphatic that higher education should be designed on scientific principles, not on market-based principles.
Yeah. Grades are very marketable.
Very
in the sense of numbers,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a way to vet students for employment and sort of to offload some of the hiring process back to universities. And maybe there's a role for that, right? Maybe in today's world there is a role for this, but Tim McKay knows more about this than I do. I don't know if you've talked with Tim. Have you met Tim at all?
I think I met Tim. Yeah, I haven't talked to him.
Yeah, you've got to talk to him. He knows so much history of all the stuff that you're interested in. But he's noted that the University of Michigan introduced grades just a little more than 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we're a 200-year-old institution, and only about half of our time have we actually even had grades. And so the original Humboldtian model didn't have grades. And we did it for a sort of arbitrary reason. It was so that we could be like qualified for some national honor society.
Wow.
And that was kind of all the thought that went into it as well.
The prestige, the marketability, it's there. Guess. It comes with it. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. But now I think we have so much understanding that grades aren't actually helping people learn, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, they might actually be holding people back from learning.
Yeah, there's a hindrance that kind of comes with it, especially at university where I think my population, my minority group, we come to campus behind. And it kind of, we realize that, hey, how is this guy in this class going to all these tailgates, coming to class stumbling and still succeeding? They've already been exposed to the resources, and for them, campus is like a walk in the park.
Sure. And so, that's another point, is that kind of blends the two things together that I was talking about of challenges for undergraduate education, is this grade-based model where you're just constantly worrying about, like, am I above the average? What's the,
Or let's look at the Michigan bell curve.
Right, the curve.
The curve.
And to this disproportionately impacts students that are already underrepresented.
Exactly.
And so is that creating the kind of culture of inclusivity that needs to happen? There's been a million diversity efforts at the university since the 70s, and our numbers are still not great. And so what we need to think about is, how do we change the overall culture? And I think that to introduce one of the things that you're now working on with the School of Education, it's called LEAPS, which is Learning, Equity, and Problem Solving for the Public Good, it's a long acronym.
But I like LEAPS. Michigan loves acronyms.
Michigan, absolutely. Absolutely. We need to make an acronym for Optimize at this point, because just will be more accepted by the, But so LEAPS is different from other university degree programs designed around mastery-based learning, where progress is recorded through the development of a rich portfolio of experiences linked to evidence of skills that are in high demand across all sectors of the U.S. economy, yet are rarely the focus of typical college coursework. And so this could mean moving through at different speeds, because there's not standardized models of grading and semesters in the way that we typically think of. Some people might choose to spend 4 years, others might choose to spend 2. It's engaging with experts across the entire university instead of just one discipline. It's engaging in communities. It's engaging with industries. It's trying to understand how people and organizations collaborate to make change on difficult problems. And it's engaging alumni in addition to the people who are on campus every day. Turns out that we can do that over Zoom pretty easily.
Yeah, it is.
And so, this to me is an incredibly inspiring vision. And I think Optimize hopefully has helped create some conditions for this in the last 10 years, where we've shown that there's this incredible learning experience and environment that can happen. It's not constrained by a semester.
Yeah.
Optimize goes across semesters. It doesn't matter. It's not constrained by grades. It's not any one discipline. But what we've been doing is co-curricular. And so a student still has to be at the university doing their normal sort of degree program, and then they can do Optimize. And what we found is a lot of students say, well, Optimize was the main thing for me.
Yeah.
Which now what we're seeing here with LEAPS is this is the main thing. This would be a degree program. So you wouldn't actually have to have grades at all.
Yeah.
From a longer episode of the Why Not Me podcast. Find it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.